Okay, we're on lesson 7. What's on this paper is duplicated out of my book. So your book should look close to like this. This is lesson 7, right there. That's what it looks like. So we're doing this so that in the future you can look back on the lessons, especially when you're having a dark hour and you need some information or some encouragement. You can look back in and see what you wrote down in the book. And in order to really grasp things, you got to go over it and over it and over it. Because if you just sit passively in class, you're not going to get much out of recovery. I'm just letting you know. I keep saying, if you sit in a mechanic shop, that don't make you a mechanic. If a person comes and sits in a mechanic shop and then a year later, can you please change this tire? You won't know how to do it. You actually got to get into the practice and really dig into what we're doing. Just sitting passively in the classes does not mean that you're recovering. According to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. So I encourage you to really go after what we're trying to show you. It's imperative that you let it sink down into your heart, become a part of your life, so that it can transform your entire being. So on XXXI, it says, what is the solution? And that statement is on the top of the page, so it's easy to find. What is the solution? This chapter is titled The Doctor's Opinion. So you're getting a secular viewpoint from a doctor through his observation. So this is what he says. What is the solution? Perhaps I can answer this by relating one of my experiences. So this is a physician's point of view. So that's why I wrote that there, so that it's clarified. This is a physician's point of view. What he's been observing and working with people that have alcohol or drug issues. And you got to keep in mind that the A book is not just for alcoholics. A lot of people have that impression. But you keep in mind that Bill Wilson also was a drug addict, and people don't realize that.
Amen.
He was addicted to morphine. He graduated from alcohol to morphine. And in the book, it clearly shows and states that this information here is also good information for those who have addiction issues. It makes that statement in the AA book. So this information is very helpful to just about anybody that is going through that situation. He says, about 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. So can you imagine, this guy is in pretty bad shape. Whenever you lose your health and you're having physical health issues, that's pretty serious. He also is having a mental breakdown in his life. Says he had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. That's getting pretty low in life. You have no hope. You have physical health problems. It's affecting your mental state. You have nothing left in life to hold to except the drink. There's no keys in your pocket, no house to go to, no car to get into. You have nothing but the drink. That's the last thing that oftentimes people hold on to. Even people on SSI, when they get the SSI check, what do? Use it for 2 days, drink it up, and then they suffer the rest of the month until that check comes again. And that becomes their lifestyle, to just get the check and drink. So his only thing was that he held to drinking. He felt his life was of no hope. It says, following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. So alcohol can affect the brain. Alcohol can cause retardation. That should scare you. Alcohol can really have an effect on how the brain functions. It kills the cells in the brain. It says he accepted the plan outlined in this book. So here's this guy in this very difficult situation. He felt his whole life was hopeless. But one thing he did is he accepted the plan outlined in this book. So it's all the information that we're sharing. It says 1 year later, he called to see me. So 1 year, the guy accepted the plan in this book, and then the doctor never saw him again for 1 year. And the guy comes back. He says, and I experienced a very strange sensation. The doctor's saying this. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. So he didn't recognize the guy. That's how much of a change took place in this guy's life. Number one, it says, see the little one? I got a little one there, right? It says, from a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. Someone close that door for me. Okay, a long time had passed with no return to alcohol. Okay, now listen. Religion's not going to stop you from drinking. Later, Bill Wilson got religion, but he drank again. Because religion in itself is not what you're seeking. It's a relationship with Jesus Christ. It's a transformation from within. If you get religion on the outside, but you're not changed on the inside, it's not going to make that big of a difference. And it's going to explain out, the A book's going to explain out that superficial attachment to religion is not going to work. It explains it out. It explains out the sequence of what will happen under that pretense. There has to be a true transformation and change in the heart. And it explains it out in the A book how that takes place. Surprisingly, people think that you can't get saved by reading the A book. But there's a lot in it that explains out how to find forgiveness, how to enter into a relationship, and what to do to maintain a close walk with God. It explains it out. So here, this guy, for a long time, had not had no return to alcohol. And he was a chronic alcoholic. He wasn't just someone that occasionally drinks or drinks a little bit each day. He was chronic. He was a worst case scenario. The worst of the worst. And he was able to stop and not even take one drink. And the doctor was shocked at this ability. I got written on the right side, this observation from the physician was the result of a conversion experience with God in his life. He was so transformed physically and spiritually that a year later he was not recognizable. So I wrote that on the right side to clarify what it was that caused this change in his life. Says, when I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and decided his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. Okay, how many people make their own diagnosis? Here, this guy, based on his clouded thinking, made his own diagnosis. You can't even trust your own thoughts. They say for the first 2 years in recovery, be careful about trusting your own thoughts. How many times in the past have we thought we were thinking clearly, but then looking back we see why did I do that? I thought I was thinking clearly when I made that decision. Now looking back, I must have been out of my mind. Especially when it comes to women. We think we're thinking clearly. Yeah, I want this woman in my life. But then she ruins your life, and then you want to go back to her. Then she ruins it a second time. And it's like, now, where was my thinking? I thought, So sometimes our thinking is quite altered, and we don't even know it. What's the first step, son? Anybody have any idea?
Make a complete decision and turn our will and our lives over to the care of God.
Okay, and our life's unmanageable, right?
Yep.
And it says we're restored to
Sanity.
Well, if I got to be restored to sanity, that means my thinking must be altered in some way. And even though I may think that I'm thinking normally, I got to be careful. Because I got years of addictive thinking and behavior that's developed over a slow period of time. I've been metamorphosized into this alcoholic addict. I've been metamorphosized into it slowly. So just like growing up, when you have a child and he's growing up, it's hard to see the growth spurts. But if you haven't seen the child, say, in 6 months and you see him, it's like, wow, you really grow. We metamorphosize into who we are, and it's going to take some time to get back out. So the bad thinking just doesn't go away. It takes a transformation and renewing of the mind to get the thinking right again. So you got to be careful what you're thinking when you're thinking, because your thoughts may not be quite accurate. Okay, now it goes on. And so he says, this guy, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. And on the left, I wrote the ultimate sacrifice, which is suicide. Now, let me tell you something about suicide and depression that you're not going to hear from the secular viewpoint, because they are not, their training and teaching is one-sided. So they're not going to understand much of what they need to know in order to help you. Most suicide is simply a cry for help because of an unmet need. How many times have you said, I wish I was dead? I've said it several times. But every time when I said it, it's not like when I came into a lot of money, or I got something exciting happen, or my NFL team won. I never say, well, they just won the Super Bowl. I feel like committing suicide. No, you only make those statements when what? Usually when you're in a crisis, and it's a cry for help, and you know what? No other way out. There's a couple women that made me feel that way. After breaking up, I wish I was dead. One time I couldn't eat for 3 days. She had my stomach in knots. I couldn't eat for 3 days. So attached. And then once the breakup, I couldn't eat. And I remember saying, I might have even said it to her, I want to kill myself. Trying to think maybe she'll get back. So there's been a couple times in my lifetime when I remember feeling that way. How about depression? There was a time in my life, it was the ultimate crisis when it comes to depression. A lot of things were going wrong. In addition to that, again, this situation also had to do partly with a relationship that had broken up, but there was other things going on at the time. And I was very depressed. And I was so depressed that I was not functioning properly, and everyone noticed it. Family, friends, employer, everyone noticed it, and they kept saying, you need help. Well, I knew that I was going through trouble, that I needed help. But their answer was, you need to go to a psychiatrist. And a long time ago, I decided I got to lean on God God's word holds much of the answers to life. I've got to seek out God. I felt in my own personal life that if I didn't seek God first and get his answers, and I ignored that and sought and disobeyed God, Psalm 1, by going out to getting secular counseling that has nothing to do, it's an atheistic approach to life's problems, and try to ask them for help, they're going to give me the wrong answers. And I decided, you know what? Despite all my friends and everyone telling me to do that, I'm not gonna do it. What I did was I got down on my knees and I sought prayer out. I got my Bible. While on my knees, I opened it up. And I said, I've got to believe what the Bible's telling me in these verses. This is the answer. I either believe it, live by it, and trust God, or I lay it aside. And I tried the pill route many years ago in my addiction. And look what it brought me. I can't go in that direction. And the first day I still felt miserable, like hopeless. The second day I still felt that way. But I stuck with it. The third day. And you know, after the third day, it was like God saying, okay, your trial and test is over. It lifted me like that. Boom. I'm like shocked. Like, you know what? That is an important lesson learned, God. And I was on top of my game. I was feeling great. Everything was good. And I started to feel that we are spiritual beings. And then I started to feel, I think partly it was a demonic attack on my life. And through much prayer and seeking God, it lifted. It taught me a lesson. That was early on, and it taught me a lesson to use that route to really go after what God has for me and trust him during dark times. So here, this guy says he was determined to die. Says he was rescued by a searching party and in desperate condition brought to me. So the doctor's saying, look, this guy had to be rescued and brought by other people. It reminds me of the story of the person that couldn't walk, laying on a bed for many years, and they broke open the roof of a house, lowered him down in there so that Jesus could be healed. And Jesus often asks this question, do you want to be made well? Why would he ask someone that question that's been in such a hopeless condition? You would think, obviously, he would want to be made well. Why would Jesus say, do you want to be made well? Because not everybody really, truly in their heart want to be made well, surprisingly. But you've got to want it. You've got to say, yes, I want to be made whole. You know, a lot of times people are looking for a few answers so they can continue their lifestyle with some control over it. That's all they want is some control over it. They don't want to divorce the thing, but you got to divorce that woman. You got to divorce that past lifestyle. You got to divorce the drugs and the alcohol. You can't separate. You got to make a clean break from the entire thing. You will not find sobriety until you do so. Sobriety, the term sobriety, many people do not get it. Why? Because they are fooled into thinking what sobriety is. Sobriety is not simply being abstinent from drugs or alcohol. That's not what the terminology really means. What it means is that you have a completely new lifestyle that you're living, and that lifestyle becomes so comfortable as a normal part of your life. And once that occurs, you have found sobriety. If you're still struggling and unsure about things, and you have no new lifestyle, and you're still hanging out with people, places, and things, but you haven't drank for 3 months, you're not sober, according to the true definition of sobriety. Sobriety is something that you work toward. You just don't get it overnight. It takes some time to change that lifestyle into a new lifestyle, get comfortable with it where it becomes second nature and just a part of your normal living before you can lay claim to having a life of sobriety. It's far more than just being abstinent. And a lot of people think that, well, if I just be abstinent, I'm going to be okay. You are not recovering if that's your goal. I'm just letting you know, Ephesians 4:28. The Bible teaches that if your only goal is, I just want to get away from the drugs or alcohol, if that's your only goal, you're missing the mark. It has to be much more than that. Because Ephesians 4:28, it says, let him who stole steal no more, semicolon. When is a thief not a thief? When he stops stealing? Not according to that verse. It said, let him who stole steal no more, semicolon. But rather, let him labor, work with his hands, and the things that are good, so that he may give back to those who need. Until the person labors, works to do the good thing, and then has a mindset to give back to the people and other people. Well, a thief don't give back, right?
Right.
He takes. He'll steal from his poor old grandmother. And he doesn't work because his living is stealing, breaking into houses. And he's not going to do the good thing because he's used to doing the bad thing. Until he gets past the word rather and starts doing these other things where it becomes a lifestyle of good, he's still a thief. According to that verse, he's still a thief, even though he might not be stealing for a short while. There are people in prison who say, well, I got a year sober. Well, obviously you got a year sober because you're sitting in prison. That's not sobriety. You can't lay claim to sobriety. It's very kind of hard. I see a lot of people when they get out of the prison, what happens? Once they get out and they really get tested, what lifestyle do they return to when they get out of prison? The same one they had before they went in. There has been no sobriety taking place. It's still the same old lifestyle. It's just that it was put on hold for a while because of prison situation. Sometimes the same thing can happen in recovery. You're in a confined environment, a controlled environment. You're being taught tools, but many times people don't use those tools. And at the end of the year, if you say, give me one tool, or tell me this, or tell me that, I can't. Give me a Bible verse. I can't. I forgot them all. I don't know any. And there's no foundation, no real true foundation. It's going to be hard pressed to not want to return to what's comfortable, what you've been doing for years. It's going to knock at your door constantly. Let me back in. I'll show you how to do it. And before you know it, we let that past lifestyle back in, and then we have trouble all over again. So here this guy's brought to the doctor, desperate condition. He says, following his physical rehabilitation. Physical rehabilitation. Physical rehabilitation does not work. It says, following his physical rehabilitation. It's highlighted. He had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort. You see what it says there? Physical rehabilitation. See, we need spiritual transformation. Physical rehabilitation, he said, in his opinion, was a waste of effort. And then he says, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. Willpower does not work.
Amen.
You write it down here. Willpower alone does not work. There's no power in willpower. We need a power outside ourselves. We're powerless. There's no power in willpower. And you can't make a light bulb your sponsor or your higher power. That is the most idiotic statement that people make I've ever heard. God is mentioned over 400 times in the A book. The person it's referring to is God, not a light bulb, not a chair. Our root cause of addiction is being self-willed. And anything that we can control can't help us. Only God can intervene and change our life. So I got written down, willpower alone does not work. It says his alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great. And depression is the most common form of coping mechanism known to man. It's a coping mechanism for the most part. You know, if your favorite team loses, you feel depressed, right? Depression is a verb. You depress yourself in order to cope with an unmet need. Until something good happens, and now I'm feeling fantastic. Depression, just like on the dash of a car, you got lights that light up when the engine's not working right. You got two choices to make. When that starts lighting up on your dashboard of your car, physically, you got two choices to make. Take the light bulb out and make the problem go away by taking the light bulb out. Or find out why is it going on, and you better open the hood of the car and check it out. And get to the root cause and solve it. Sometimes when we go through things, it's God trying to speak to us through those feelings. The great Apostle Paul, you think he'd be on top of his game, huh? The great Apostle Paul. There was a time in his life he said he despaired even of life itself. There was a time in his life he was at an all-time low. The great physician, the greatest, you could say the greatest psychiatrist who ever lived, what would he have chosen to do? It tells us it says he sent a comforter to comfort him in his need. There's nothing better than good, wholesome counseling and moral support from another person when you're going through a crisis. You need someone to talk to. You need someone that's gonna lift you up. It's gonna put their hand on your shoulder and say, look, I'm gonna walk with you until you get out of this situation. We're gonna do this together. That was the cure that God told and gave to the Apostle Paul. And it saved his situation. It says that you comfort others by the comfort by which God has comforted you. Have you ever needed comfort through a miserable part of your life? You needed some support. Maybe the person of comfort is your mother or your father or a good friend. Someone to go and talk to. Someone you know that's genuinely going to care and understand and walk you through until you get out of it. It says that we're supposed to comfort others with the same comfort by which God has comforted you. And I've been comforted by God many times, and he's never given me a quick fix with a pill. It's always through other means to really help me to get to the root cause, know why it's occurring, and then solve my problems and learn to trust God. That's a process, to learn to trust God in the midst of trials and troubles. Okay, it goes on at the bottom of XXXI, last paragraph, it says, his alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. We doubted if even that would have any effect. Moral psychology alone does not work. So periodically, I'm going to make that statement. In and of itself, it's not going to have a great effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. The drink was his only source of comfort and help, and he was able to not do it again. It says for many years he had not had one drink. So you have to divorce it. You can't switch over to something milder or a different brand or okay, I was a heroin addict, but I'm just going to smoke marijuana. You can't do that kind of behavior. It has to be total abstinence. It says, I see him now and then, and he is a fine specimen of manhood, as one could wish to meet. He says, I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. I got written down, approach this book with an open mind and let God begin to speak into your life. Okay, now starts page 1, which is Bill's story. We're going to read just a part of it, and I'm going to open up, and you're going to see it like you've never seen it before. You might get bored about reading a story, but be patient, pay attention, because there's some things written here that you've got to take heed to. If you ignore it, it'll be to your own demise and probably your relapse. It's that important. Okay, on the top it says Bill's story. Cross out the word Bill and write your name on top. So we each have a story to tell, a life that we lived. And on the top, write 21 years old. It was the year 1917. That's how old he was when he took his first drink, 21. It says, war fever ran high in the New England town to which we knew. Young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. You know, he's talking about the military. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime, with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last, and in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. So here he is, he's growing up. He's 21 years old. He's discovering life. But he also discovered something for the first time, liquor. He never had a drink prior to 21. He discovered liquor. He says, I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. In other words, growing up, deep within the recesses of his mind, he knew it was wrong to drink. That's how he was taught. That's what he heard about drinking. It's a vice you don't want to enter into. And he said, I forgot all the strong warnings and the prejudices concerning it. You know, growing up, we are very sensitive to wrong and right. In order to do the wrong, you have to ignore the prompting of that still small voice. When you first say a curse word, whatever age it was, deep within your heart, you feel it's wrong to do that, talk like that. That's the first impression. Amen. You get a still small voice saying, "Are you uncomfortable?" When you just said that. But then you say it again, and the third time, fourth time, fifth time. Before you know it, you're doing it subconsciously. It don't bother you at all. How about, I remember getting those bubble gum cigarettes. Even the bubble gum cigarettes bothered me. I get that bubble gum cigarette little box at the candy store, and I'd go outside and thought I was a cool dude, and I'd blow through it, and the little white stuff come out, you know. And then eventually you graduate to something bigger and bigger and bigger. But at the beginning, that still small voice again, this is wrong. I remember going and getting chewing tobacco at the store. It was way out in the country, Roxbury, Pennsylvania, out in a mountain town. I had to walk like a couple miles to get to the nearest store. Me and my cousin. And coming back, we got chewing tobacco. And coming back, I knew you put it like between your gum and your cheek. I put that stuff there, man. I got so sick because I swallowed the juice, and when that hit my stomach, man, I felt like dying, man. I fell on the ground. I'm like, oh, this is what it feels like. I never did it again. Now, I guess I could have tried later, and got conditioned to doing it.
What if you were raised that way and it didn't bother you?
Well, I guess that's possible, yeah. Yeah, you can be taught, maybe your parents cursed and you thought it was normal or whatever. Yeah.
Gets rid of tapeworm.
Yeah. But, you know, growing up, in order to be conditioned into adulthood and do some of these things, we know it's illegal. Some things are illegal. Some things are wrong. We do it anyways. We gotta get rid of that still small voice. So he has this still small voice telling him that he shouldn't be drinking. Says, in time we sailed for over there, referring to overseas. I was very lonely. I circled that. Very lonely. It's a very lonely was the root cause of him developing an alcoholic lifestyle. It's a first sign that there's something else going on in his life. Deep within the recesses of his being, he's a very lonely person. And the loneliness helped to contribute to him being developed into a full-fledged alcoholic and drug addict. So in the relapse prevention workbook, it'll ask you to go back and determine, why did you first start drinking or drugging? Was it through experimentation? Was it through trying to get your peers to support you? Was it through something else? Try to find out the root cause. Try to go back and think through. Try to determine what was going on. If years later, if this guy was sitting in a recovery program and say, okay, Bill, go back and you tell me what was the first feelings and emotional problems you were going through when you first started drinking. He might not even been able to think back that far to really gain it. But here it states it. He was a very lonely person. That you better mark down is what I would tell him. Because loneliness is going to be your trigger to bring you back into your drinking. How are you going to sit, Bill? I would say, how are you going to sit, Bill, in a room after graduation by yourself, isolated and alone? How are you going to do it? All those old feelings are going to come back. And that loneliness is going to be a trigger. And our brain has what's called instant recall. In other words, the brain never forgets anything. That might surprise you, because there's many times we try to think of something, we can't think of it no more. It's still there in the brain. We just can't bring it to conscious awareness. But the subconscious mind knows everything. It don't forget anything. They did an experiment with an 80-year-old man where they did proper stimulations of the brain, and he was able to recall a newspaper he read in his 20s. And they started to discover that the brain actually is such a marvelous instrument, it don't forget nothing. So in other words, all those past experiences that we went through as alcohol or drug addicts, all the detailed information, all the past experiences, the brain's never forgotten it. It's there somewhere. And all it takes is a trigger to bring it all back again. And if the trigger is loneliness, and you're sitting somewhere where that's triggered, you better be prepared to know how to deal with it, because if not, you know what you're going to probably do? Go out and probably find maybe a woman to give you company. I mean, so a lot of times we don't look for another guy to say, hey, come on over and talk with me. I'm lonely. No, we don't normally do that. We usually look for the opposite sex. And usually it's someone that's not going to read the Bible to us, right? I'll come on over, but I'm telling you, no sex. I'm just going to come over and read the Bible to you. What do you think we would do in that state of mind? Well, I'll call you back. Hold on. And we'd probably look for someone else, right? Because we're lonely, right? And we're looking for ultimately sexual gratification, thinking that's going to help enhance and do away with the loneliness. So again, we're returning back to what? Insanity. Now our thinking is really starting to get off the rocker. Instead of thinking recovery, we're thinking old solutions to old problems. And then before you know it, she comes over and has what? A 6-pack of beer in her hand. Well, I didn't plan on you bringing that over, but come on in. Let's sit down and talk. And before you know it, you're back drinking again. So you've got to be aware of your relapse warning signs. So in the relapse prevention book, it tells you to figure out what your relapse warning signs are. When they start to develop, don't ignore them while you still have control. Because see, it says our life became what? Unmanageable. That can occur again. While you still have manageability, you better try to get it straightened out, because manageability shifts to unmanageability rather fast. And if you wait too long, once you become unmanageable, you will not, and I know people say, call your sponsor. We will not call anybody once our life has become unmanageable. I don't care what people say. I know it from experience. Once my life has become unmanageable, I will not be calling anybody. I will get on a train, that train has no brakes, and I have no plans or ability to get off until it wrecks. It is very difficult to be saved once my life becomes unmanageable. So the key is, when it's in infancy and I still have some control and manageability with God's in control of my life, got to deal with it early on. And even when it gets just a little bit of hold on you, it's hard. Unmanageability hits you so fast. You know, all it takes is 1 hour of loneliness, and it'll hit you. And then you can't stop. You end up doing what you normally would do. Okay, it goes on and he says, we landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. So all during this time that he's starting to drink, his conscience is eating at him. And this is what it said on the tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot, whether he died by musket or by pot. Now listen to this, it's highlighted. Ominous warning, which I failed to heed. He's saying, when I read that on that tombstone, it bothered me. And he said, that's another warning. So he keeps getting these warnings. But he said, I failed to heed. Throughout the recovery program, you're going to get a series of still small voices, warnings. And you can't ignore it. It may be a small prompting of a voice saying, hey, you're not quite doing what you know you're supposed to do. Or you need to stop doing that. You know, it could be something very small. That's why on the side of the paper, we got 1 Kings 19, verse 11 to 12. It's good to write that somewhere in your Bible, because it explains about how God speaks to people. It says through a still small voice, a gentle whisper. It's not through a fire or through the wind or through other loud stuff. He speaks to you gently, small prompting. The great apostle Paul, he said, I exercise my conscience to be void of offense against God and man. That's a great way to live. I exercise my conscience. Our conscience speaks to us in volumes every day. Your conscience will speak to you today, through some way, some form, some fashion. He says it was his goal and his plan in life. I'm going to live my life where my conscience is free of offense toward God and toward man. So here he's failing to give heed to these warnings. Now, what did I say the root cause of addiction is? Anybody recall? Okay, being self-willed, right? That's why step 3, you're turning your will over to God, because self-will, we are self-willed to the extreme. We are so self-willed, that we don't even know we're self-willed because we're self-willed. We are so self-willed that in order to get God, in order to relinquish self and let God run my life, that's a hard step to take. Step 3 is the most serious step. And the A book says, do not take this step lightly and do not go beyond this point until you're fully, completely, 100% ready. Why? Because what's the use of going past step 3 and you're still self-willed? Then if we're still self-willed, all we're going to do is manipulate the system, manipulate the con game. So step 3 is extremely serious step, not to be taken lightly. And you got to contemplate what it really means. And the AA book will go into detail and explain out what you need to do, how to do it, and how to keep it. So here it says this: every time I hit the word I, we got 10 more minutes. Every time I hit the word I, highlight it. 22, now he's 22, a year had passed, and a veteran of foreign wars. I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises which I would manage with the utmost assurance. Page 2. I took a night law course and obtained employment as investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I'd proved to the world I was important. The work took me about Wall Street, and little by little I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I took too drunk to think or write. I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. On the left margin, write the first stage of the effect of alcoholism. It disturbs family members. It disturbed my wife. I had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought was so derived. Okay, now he's 26 years old. So in the left margin, you write 26. Started drinking at 21. Now he's 26. And he's showing some real signs of alcoholism. It's disturbing his family, his friends, people around him. Here it's disturbing his wife. He's now developing the addictive behavior of being self-centered, which is the root cause of his addiction.
Rick, where does it say he's 26 at? Where am I putting that?
Just write it in the left margin. It doesn't say that he's 26, but when you study other books on the A book, it'll say at this point he's 26.
Where at? Just anywhere?
Anywhere on the left margin. So that you can see the progression. 21 started his first drink, now he's 26. First effect, it's affecting people around him. The first addictive behavior, lifestyle, is now he's developing a really self-centered way of living. It's all about I. And he's really becoming an ingrained, self-willed, self-centered person. It's a part of the overall addictive lifestyle. Okay, next paragraph says, by the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grip. In other words, coupled with the alcoholism and being very self-willed and having loneliness as a root, one of the other root causes, he's now having a secondary addiction. See, we're not just addicted to one thing. Well, if I just deal with this drugs and alcohol, I'm going to be fine. No, there's probably bigger addictions that you got to deal with. The alcohol or drugs probably is but a symptom. That's what the A book says. It's but a symptom of some bigger problems going on. It's not the root, it's not the thing we're going to focus on predominantly. There's other things going on. And if you ignore the other things and just try to address the alcohol or drugs, you're not going to succeed. There's other things going on. He's developing a workaholic attitude. And that workaholism, as you'll see later, runs the show along with the alcohol. So it's kind of like hand in glove. They both go together. His workaholism, his alcoholism. And now loneliness and being self-willed to the max. You see how it's all developing in his life. And it goes down through. You can read the rest of the chapter there and highlight all the I's. And then jumping over to we're actually past our lesson on this paper. But we'll do it anyways. Jumping over to page 3. Middle paragraph, for the next. See that? For the next. Everyone got that paragraph?
Sir.
Page 3. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Okay, I got this statement highlighted. Drink was taking an important and accelerating part in my life. That's the second stage of alcoholism. So over on the other page, you got first stage, affecting my family members and friends. Second stage, it's a priority in my life. Says there was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and you can figure out that word. I'm not going to even say it. I made a host of fair weather friends. Well, his fair weather friends were also what? Drinkers. They weren't people that didn't drink. They were drinkers. So he's developing friends that centered around the addictive lifestyle. So you can see how that is developing through. So we'll go back over some of that in lesson 9 quickly, and then we'll get into the third and fourth stages and what does that mean. It goes down to 6 stages that you work through. So here he's at the second stage. Okay, someone want to close this out?